A millionaire accepts a bet to marry an obese woman who challenges his standards. What starts as a game of power and control soon takes an unexpected turn. Noah Coleman, a successful businessman with an impressive fortune, was known for both his arrogance and charm. That night, at a luxurious party filled with the elite, his friend Eric approached with a mischievous smile. Eric was the type of friend who loved to provoke. He knew Noah's massive ego well, and knew exactly where to poke to spark his interest. Amid laughter and teasing, Eric made an unexpected proposal. "Noah, I've heard you're the kind of man who doesn't turn down a good challenge," Eric began, disguising the provocation in a casual tone. Noah raised an eyebrow, looking at him with curiosity and slight disdain. He enjoyed challenges, especially those involving power and money. To him, life was about proving his superiority. "There's nothing I can't do. Tell me, what's the game this time? I hope it's something worth my time," Noah replied, with a confident smile and a mocking tone. Eric smiled, pleased to have piqued his friend's interest. The bet he was about to propose was indeed unusual and risky. "How about proving you can marry someone outside your standards? Not a model, not one of those socialites who parade around. I'm talking about a woman who's the complete opposite of your taste, someone you would never choose. And all you need to do is stay married for just 3 months." Noah laughed with disdain. "And what do I get out of this?" Eric smiled, savoring the moment. $500,000, and the glory of knowing that even in marriage, you can win any bet. After 3 months, just file for divorce and go on with your life as you please. Noah hesitated, but not for long. The idea was absurd, but the offered amount and the challenge of proving his superiority were irresistible. He saw it as a simple power game, another way to show everyone he controlled the world around him. Noah looked at Eric's extended hand, feeling the weight of the proposal. It was just a game, he thought. No feelings, no real responsibility. He just needed to prove he could do it. He shook Eric's hand, sealing the deal. After sealing the deal, Eric already had someone specific in mind and made sure to introduce her to Noah. Her name was Stella Carter. Unlike the models and socialites Noah was used to dating, Stella was an average-looking woman with generous curves, something completely outside his usual standards. She wasn't dazzling or sophisticated in the millionaire's eyes, but she had a strong presence and a reputation for being an independent and strong woman. This only piqued Noah's curiosity even more. He was used to controlling everything and everyone around him, and the idea of dealing with someone who wouldn't be easily influenced was, at the very least, intriguing. So, Noah decided to set up a meeting at one of the city's most luxurious restaurants. After all, he knew how to impress people with his status and possessions. And despite the challenge, he believed Stella wouldn't be different from the others. That night, Noah arrived at the restaurant with his usual air of superiority. He waited patiently while surveying the environment, confident that by the end of the dinner, he would have Stella under his control, ready to accept the terms. Shortly after, she entered the restaurant. Stella wore a simple outfit, but seemed completely at ease. Contrary to what Noah had imagined, she didn't appear dazzled by the sophisticated surroundings. In fact, she maintained an expression of indifference that slightly unsettled him. They sat down and exchanged initial pleasantries, but before he could steer the conversation as he wished, Stella was direct, cutting off any attempts at charm or small talk. "I know why we're here, Noah. I know about the bet, the time frame, and the amount you'll win if you manage to marry me," she said with a slight smile that showed confidence. "And before you start convincing me, you need to know that I have my own conditions and reasons for accepting this marriage." Noah was surprised, but tried to hide it. Though he wasn't used to losing control of situations, this was new for him. No woman he had been with before had confronted him so openly. "Interesting," he said, trying to keep the tone casual. "And what kind of conditions would those be?" Stella observed him for a moment before responding, as if she wanted to measure her words. "If I agree, Noah, you're going to have to respect my space, and don't treat me like one of the women you're used to. I'm not a trophy or a prize, and I'm not here to please you. This marriage is just a front for me, and in 3 months, we'll be divorced as planned. While we're married, I want the freedom to live my life, and you're not going to interfere with my choices." Noah listened to every word, intrigued. He expected some resistance, but not for Stella to take control of the situation like this. Still, the challenge only seemed to make things more interesting. "I understand. And what if I agree to those terms?" he replied, trying to hide the smile threatening to show. "Then we have a deal," Stella responded seriously. "But know that I'm not impressed by money or status. If at any point you think you can control me, this ends right then and there." Noah nodded. This woman really was different. He was facing someone who not only accepted her own terms but seemed immune to his charm. And that only made the game more enticing. They shook hands, sealing the deal. Noah left the restaurant feeling a strange mix of challenge and intrigue. He had taken the bet to prove he could win over any woman, but it was clear that with Stella, nothing would be as he expected. The first round of the game had begun, and little did he know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would change his life forever. A week later, the wedding took place in a quiet ceremony, without the glamour and flashes that usually accompanied Noah. He was used to extravagance and grand celebrations, but Stella made it clear she wanted something simple and low-key. Noah hesitated but gave in. After all, he'd agreed to her terms. And for him, 3 months would go by fast, a guaranteed win. After the wedding, Noah brought Stella to his mansion, a stunning property with vast gardens and panoramic views of the city. He was used to seeing people look amazed when they stepped in for the first time. But Stella, unlike everyone else, walked in without showing any surprise. Her gaze moved across the space, not with admiration, but with an indifference that threw him off. With a confident smile, Noah walked beside her through the grand hall, waiting for some sign of amazement. But Stella remained unfazed, as if none of it really mattered. When they stopped, she turned to him, her gaze steady and determined. 3 months, Noah, Stella said firmly. That's the timeline, not a day longer. Noah was silent for a moment, surprised by her firmness. Her tone left no room for doubt. She was there for her own reasons, and had no intention of giving in to whatever temptations he might offer. But despite her tone, Noah only smiled, confident that things would change with time. He'd seen this kind of resistance before. For Noah, seduction was an art he had mastered. Over the years, women had fallen for him, his mansion, the expensive gifts, and the extravagant lifestyle he provided. It was only a matter of time before Stella would see the benefits of being with him, until she allowed herself to be drawn in. "Don't worry, Stella. I'm sure you'll change your mind before the 3 months are up," he said with a teasing smile. She only raised an eyebrow, her gaze steady and unshakable. "I'm not like the women you're used to, Noah. If you think you can buy me with gifts or luxuries, you're very mistaken," she replied, with a calm that left him slightly off balance. That night, Noah tried his first tactic. He arranged for an exquisite dinner with the finest dishes prepared by the personal chef he'd hired especially for the occasion. The table was set with silverware and candles, and the hall was prepared to create the perfect atmosphere. He was certain this display would impress Stella. But when she sat at the table, all he got was a slight nod of approval and nothing more. During dinner, Noah talked about his wealth, the companies he owned, the travels he'd taken around the world. He expected that hearing about his lifestyle would tempt Stella to be part of it. But her response was always the same, a discreet smile and a brief comment, as if none of it really mattered. Finally, Stella broke the silence. "Noah, I'm not here for your fortune or your status. I accepted this bet because I have my own reasons, and nothing you show me is going to impress me." Her coldness challenged him. Deep down, he thought that this initial resistance was just a facade, something that would eventually fade away. To him, Stella was nothing more than a new challenge, and he was sure that, like all the others, she would eventually give in. Let's play a game with those who only read the comments? Type milkshake in the comments. Only those who get this far will understand. Now, let's continue with the story. But that night, as he watched her cross the mansion's hall and retire to her room without even looking back, Noah had a strange feeling, an unease he had never felt before. For the first time, he wondered if he really had control of the situation. What was supposed to be a simple bet was turning into something different. Stella didn't seem like the type of woman who would give in, and for the first time, Noah began to realize that maybe he was facing a challenge that all his wealth couldn't solve. The following days were a real test for Noah. Stella was a constant presence in his mansion, but she seemed completely immune to the luxury surrounding her. He tried several times to impress her with expensive gifts, exclusive event invitations, and exquisite dinners, but her indifference remained unwavering. Stella lived as if Noah's money meant nothing, and this deeply frustrated him. One night, after a long day of work, Noah found her in the garden, sitting among the flowers. She looked calm, almost serene, lost in her thoughts. He approached, determined to break the invisible barrier she maintained. "You're at home, Stella. You can ask for anything you want," Noah said with a slight smile, trying once again to appeal to the luxuries she avoided. Stella looked at him for a moment, a gaze that seemed to see through any mask of self-sufficiency he tried to maintain. Then, she let out a sigh before responding. "You don't understand, Noah. Nothing here matters to me. I didn't come to take advantage of your fortune or your status. If that were the case, I wouldn't be here." Noah remained silent, feeling there was something deeper behind her words. No matter how hard he tried, it seemed there was a barrier that Stella wouldn't let him cross. Determined to understand what drove her, he provoked her. "Then why did you accept this bet, Stella? You could have said no and continued with your peaceful life. What brought you here?" Stella hesitated, and for the first time, Noah saw a slight shadow of pain on her face. She looked away as if deciding how much she should reveal. "I accepted because," she began, but quickly changed her tone. "Let's just say I have reasons beyond what you can imagine. I came here to face something from my past." Her words left Noah intrigued. Stella's indifference seemed anchored in something deeper, something he didn't fully understand. And though he tried to ignore it, that curiosity was eating away at him. "Your past?" he questioned, trying to find more answers. Stella sighed, looking at the horizon, as if she wanted to escape the conversation. There was a resistance in her expression, but at the same time, a silent desire to unburden herself. "Let's just say that someone's money and power changed my life at a crucial moment, and it wasn't for the better," she said in a bitter tone. "Since then, I've learned that wealth doesn't mean happiness. On the contrary, it often only brings destruction." Noah remained quiet, absorbing every word. For the first time, he saw a crack in Stella's armor, a glimpse of what she carried with her. But before he could ask more, Stella stood up, ending the conversation abruptly. "I think I've said more than I should. Good night, Noah." She walked away, leaving him alone in the garden. Noah stood there, pondering her words. Stella's coldness, her resistance to luxury, and her firm stance now made sense. As he went back inside, Noah felt something strange. This woman, who initially was just a bet, was starting to awaken feelings in him that he couldn't define. There was a mix of curiosity, something that went far beyond the control he always prided himself on having over people. Days passed, and Noah was increasingly frustrated. He had tried everything to impress Stella: gifts, dinners, luxuries, but nothing seemed to shake her firmness. To Stella, Noah's wealth and extravagant lifestyle were indifferent. And for him, this constant resistance was unbearable. He had always had control over the people around him, but Stella seemed to deflect all his attempts. Determined to break her in some way, Noah changed his approach. Instead of trying to win her over with gifts and luxuries, he decided to tighten his control. If Stella wanted distance, he'd keep a close eye on her. The next morning, as she prepared to leave for the flower shop, Noah was waiting in the living room, his expression firm and resolute. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, his tone making it clear it wasn't just a casual question. Stella looked at him in surprise, grabbing her purse. "To my job, Noah. I already told you I'm not giving that up." He stepped forward, blocking her path. "I'm not allowing you to keep up with this routine, Stella. You're my wife now. I don't need my wife out dealing with the public like," he hesitated, searching for the right words, "just anyone." Stella crossed her arms, her gaze hardening. "I'm not a piece in your game, Noah. That's not what we agreed on. I accepted your terms, but I won't give up who I am." Noah felt his face heat up. He was used to getting his way, and her coldness infuriated him. He wanted her to bend, to give in to him like all the others, But Stella remained steadfast, and that only fueled his determination to control her. "You're in my house, Stella," he said, his voice grave. "And under my conditions, don't forget that. While you're here, you'll do what I expect of a wife." She raised an eyebrow, defiant. "Your conditions, Noah? The deal was for 3 months, and none of that included controlling what I do. I'm not a prisoner here." "You might not understand how things work in my world, Stella, but as long as we're married, you'll follow my rules," he insisted, stepping even closer. Stella held his gaze, unfazed. The tension between them was palpable, as if they were both fighting for control. She took a deep breath, crossed her arms, and responded coolly, "I've seen enough of men who try to control everything around them, Noah. And believe me, that kind of behavior doesn't intimidate me." He clenched his teeth, feeling his anger build. No one challenged him like this. No one dared to keep control in his presence. But Stella, with her calculated calmness, was unraveling each attempt he made to dominate. "Fine," he finally said, trying to regain control of the situation. "You want to work? Work. But don't think that changes anything." Stella walked past him without looking back, her stance firm and determined. Noah watched her leave, feeling both frustrated and drawn to her strength. He'd never dealt with someone like Stella before, someone who seemed completely immune to his authority. That night, he saw her return from the flower shop with the same indifferent stance. Stella moved through the house like a woman who knew exactly who she was, while he felt more and more off balance. For the first time, Noah began to question if this power play would lead anywhere. Without realizing it, the bet he thought he was in control of was starting to reveal something he'd never faced before: a lack of control over his own life. And as he thought about it, a restlessness grew inside him. Maybe this wasn't just about winning. Maybe he was, unknowingly, up against something much bigger and deeper. The days at the mansion had become a series of confrontations between Noah and Stella, a silent battle that consumed them both. Noah couldn't break her, and that disarmed him in ways he'd never expected. Stella was like a fortress, indifferent to luxuries and unafraid to stand up to him. But what he didn't know was how much this apparent coldness hid a deeper pain. One night, after yet another heated argument, Noah found her in the garden, alone, wrapped in shadows and silence. Something in her expression was different. She looked exhausted, as if carrying the weight of the world. Driven by anger and confusion, Noah approached. "Stella, what is your problem?" he said, trying to keep his composure. "Why are you even here if you despise all of this? Why accept a marriage you clearly don't want?" She stayed silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the ground. When she finally looked up, Noah saw something he'd never expected to find: a restrained anger and an old, deeply rooted pain. "You want to know why I'm here, Noah?" she said, her voice bitter, almost cutting. "I accepted this bet for one simple reason: to get revenge on you. I did this so you could feel at least a little of what my family and I went through, to make you suffer." Her words hit him like a punch. Noah froze, trying to process what he'd just heard. "Revenge?" he repeated, his voice trembling. "What are you talking about, Stella?" She took a step towards him, her face filled with the pain she had tried to hide for so long. Her eyes were full of bitterness, and each word was like an outpouring of something that had been suffocated for years. "Years ago, my family had a small business. My father worked his whole life to keep it going, and it was our livelihood. Then an investor showed up, promising opportunities and growth. An investor who seemed willing to help us." Stella paused, taking a deep breath. "That investor was you, Noah. You took everything we built. In a matter of months, we lost everything. My family was destroyed, my father fell ill, and died with a debt we could never repay." Noah felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He vaguely remembered that deal. To him, it had been just another profitable business, an acquisition like any other, but he never imagined the devastating impact it had caused. Stella continued, not giving him time to process the guilt flooding him. "That's why I accepted the bet. It wasn't for the money, fame, or luxury. I accepted because I wanted you to feel a bit of what you caused." She took another step closer, her eyes full of resentment. "I wanted you to face someone who would never yield, who would always resist, so you'd know what it's like to lose control over something you want." Noah felt a tightness in his chest, as if he were losing his breath. He, who had always prided himself on his strength and coldness in business, was now face to face with the consequences of his actions, and the weight of it was unbearable. Stella. I didn't know. I never imagined my decision could destroy someone's life like that. To me, it was just, he began to say, but the words escaped him. How could he justify what he had done? She shook her head, disheartened. That's the problem, Noah. To you, people like my family and I are just numbers. You never bothered to imagine the consequences of your decisions. Lives were destroyed, and you didn't even notice. Silence fell between them, heavy and suffocating. Noah felt devastated, not knowing how to repair the damage he had caused. He never imagined that his ambition could have hurt someone so deeply. For the first time, he felt the weight of his actions, real regret. And even though he wanted to apologize, he knew words weren't enough. Stella turned away, giving him her back. You wanted to control my life, but I would never bend, Noah. That will be my revenge, to make you taste the bitterness of not getting what you want, of losing control. Her words fell on him like a final sentence. Noah was completely shattered. He wanted to defend himself, to apologize, but he knew nothing he said would be enough. All that remained was the crushing weight of guilt and the emptiness of knowing he had lost more than he ever imagined. Stella walked away, leaving the room without looking back, while he stood there, paralyzed, facing what was left of his own humanity. Noah knew at that moment that he had lost something he could never recover. Weeks passed, and Stella continued to keep a painful and cold distance. She ignored him whenever possible, responded with few words, and treated him with an indifference that left him increasingly frustrated and at the same time regretful. He had tried everything: gestures of kindness, re-evaluations in his business, and even donations to the community where she grew up, but nothing seemed enough. One night, after another day of failed attempts, Noah decided to confront her. He could no longer bear the impenetrable barrier Stella had erected between them, and he needed an answer, no matter how painful it might be. He found her in the garden, under the soft moonlight, her eyes fixed on the horizon, as if trying to distance herself from everything and everyone. Stella, he began, his voice laden with a weariness and sincerity he rarely showed. What do you want me to do? Please, tell me. I'll do anything for you to someday forgive me, to stop treating me like a ghost. She remained silent, her eyes fixed on the stars, and Noah thought she might ignore him again. But finally, she sighed, and her shoulders seemed to bear the burden of something she had been holding inside. There's nothing you can do, Noah, she said, her voice low, almost a whisper, but filled with an old, deep pain. There's nothing you can do to make up for everything I lost. All the suffering I went through, nothing can erase that. Noah felt a knot form in his throat. Her voice was laden with resentment, but there was something else, a sadness so deep that he could hardly breathe. Stella, please. I need to know. He hesitated, carefully choosing his words. What are you hiding the most? She looked at him for a long moment, as if deciding whether or not to reveal a part of her past that she had always kept secret. There was pain and hesitation in her eyes, and when she finally spoke, each word felt like a confession torn from deep within her. A few days before my father died, she began, her voice trembling. I was pregnant. Noah froze, shock washing over him. The world seemed to stop as he processed those words. Pregnant? He repeated, barely able to believe what he was hearing. Stella nodded, but her gaze was distant, as if she was reliving that painful moment in her mind. I was pregnant with my ex-boyfriend's child. When he found out, he left me. Just disappeared, leaving me alone with no explanation. She paused, fighting back tears, then continued, her voice growing weaker. So I had to take care of my sick father on my own, trying to stay strong as everything fell apart around me. Noah couldn't breathe. He had never imagined Stella carried such a painful story, such a devastating loss. She had always seemed so strong, so unbreakable, and now here she was, vulnerable, showing him scars that he had helped reopen. Stella took a deep breath, and he saw the tears finally starting to fall down her face. When my father died, I lost whatever hope I had left. The stress, the despair. I couldn't handle it. She stopped, her voice breaking, but she held his gaze, wanting him to feel every word. I ended up losing the baby. I lost everything. My father, my family, my child, and it was all because of your decisions, your greed, your ego. Her words were like knives, each one sharper than the last. Noah felt the weight of her revelation, the guilt burning inside his chest like never before. He wanted to say something, to do something that could erase Stella's suffering, but he was paralyzed by the pain he had caused. Stella. He tried to speak, but his voice barely came out. I didn't know. I had no idea that. Of course you didn't know, she interrupted, her voice now filled with intense bitterness. Because you never cared to know. To you it was all just numbers, contracts, financial transactions. But to me, it was my life. And I lost everything, Noah. Everything. She looked at him with fierce intensity, and Noah knew, in that moment, that he could never forgive himself for what he had done. He hadn't just destroyed a business. He had taken away any possibility of happiness for Stella, any hope. He was responsible for a pain that could never be erased. I know what I did is unforgivable, Noah murmured, his voice shaking, feeling like he was falling apart. And I don't expect you to forgive me, Stella, but please, tell me what I can do to at least ease your pain. I'd do anything. Stella observed him for a long moment, and the pain in her eyes seemed immeasurable. The silence that followed was so heavy that Noah felt like he was drowning. He knew that no words could make up for the past, that nothing could bring back her child or erase the suffering she carried. Finally, Stella took a deep breath, looking away and wiping her tears. When she spoke again, her voice was tired, marked by the weight of someone who had endured more than anyone should have to bear. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you, Noah, she said, her voice piercingly honest. What you did, what I lost, it can't be repaired. But I can see that you're trying, and maybe there's a chance that one day I'll find a way to move on. But it won't be easy, and it won't be quick. Noah felt a faint glimmer of hope, but he knew the road to redemption would be long and difficult. He nodded, respecting her pain, accepting that he would carry that weight for the rest of his life. As Stella walked away, disappearing into the mansion, Noah stood alone under the night sky, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. He knew he had destroyed a life in an irreversible way, and no matter how hard he tried, he could never undo the pain he had caused. And that night, Noah finally understood what it truly meant to lose everything. That night, Noah barely slept. Stella's words echoed in his mind, the weight of guilt pressing down on his chest. Her pain, her coldness, her resilience, all of it made sense now. And he found himself thinking about how much she had suffered, all because of him. The next morning, Noah woke up with a new and intense purpose. If he wanted any kind of redemption, he would have to start making real, concrete changes. With the first step in mind, he went to the office, where he called his lawyer and financial advisors. He had decided to reverse what he could of the predatory acquisitions he had made, starting with Stella's family's old business. The company was now owned by new owners, but Noah was determined to reverse as much of the damage as he could. Let's play a game for those who only read the comments. Type pizza in the comments. Only those who get this far will understand. Now let's continue with the story. Later that week, Stella noticed the subtle changes in Noah's behavior. He stopped insisting on controlling her movements and seemed more reserved, more introspective. She saw how he spent hours in the office, and although she didn't ask, she sensed that something was different. One evening, seeing her in the garden, Noah approached slowly. Stella watched him, surprised by the vulnerability on his face. He took a deep breath, as if searching for the courage to say what he needed to. Stella, I know words aren't enough to fix what I did, but I want you to know that I'm trying. I made some changes in my business. I asked them to reevaluate what happened with your family's company. I know it won't erase the past, but it's a start. Stella looked at him, eyes narrowed, assessing his sincerity. Part of her wanted to believe, but years of pain and resentment made her skeptical. Do you think that changes anything? She replied, her voice controlled. It's not just about the money, Noah. What you took from my family was more than possessions. You took our livelihood, our dreams, our peace. He nodded, feeling the weight of each of her words. He knew that a simple financial change wouldn't be enough, but he was willing to keep trying. I know, and I'm not asking you to forgive me, or expecting you to accept everything all at once. I just want you to know that I'm trying. I want to be a better person, even if I can never fully make up for what I did." There was a long silence between them. Stella seemed to struggle with what she felt, torn between the hurt and the seed of hope that, despite everything, began to sprout. After all, she never expected Noah to really change, but here he was, standing before her, looking different. Noah started making weekly visits to Stella's old town, trying to understand the impact of his past decisions. He sought contact with the people who had been affected and was committed to fixing each of the wrongs he had done. It was difficult work, and he knew many would never forgive him. But with each step, he felt less empty, closer to a purpose that went beyond money and power. At first, Stella ignored his attempts, but over the weeks, she heard stories from the townspeople and was surprised to discover how committed he was. Noah's transformation was real, and though she tried to deny it, it touched something deep within her. One night, finding themselves in the library, Stella finally decided to break the silence. "Why are you doing this, Noah?" she asked, her voice low, almost hesitant. "You could just ignore me and wait for these 3 months to be over." He looked at her, and Stella saw something new in his eyes, something deeper and more genuine. "Because, for the first time, I understand that my life never had a real purpose. I always prided myself on being in control, on accumulating money and power, but you made me realize that all of it is empty," he sighed. "And because, somehow, I want you to know that I am capable of change. Not out of pride or ego, but because in some way your presence has made me want to be a better person." Stella remained silent, and Noah respected the moment, knowing she still needed time to process everything. He no longer saw the end of the 3 months as the final point of their bet, but as a chance to truly start over, to prove he was capable of turning his past into something that maybe Stella could one day forgive. For Stella, Noah's words were a mix of relief and uncertainty. Despite all the resentment she carried, she felt there was something genuine in his actions. And as they both remained silent in the library, Stella began to realize that maybe, just maybe, the man she had despised so much was becoming someone she could learn to respect. The next day, Noah found Stella in the garden, where she spent hours tending to the flowers. He approached silently, keeping a respectful distance, and watched as Stella delicately cared for the plants as if they were the only thing she had left. "Stella," he began, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I know there aren't any words or actions that could undo what happened. But I'm here. And if there's anything I can do to help you move forward, I'll do it." She paused, keeping her gaze fixed on the flowers. For a moment he thought she wouldn't answer, that she'd keep ignoring him as always. But then, Stella turned to him, her expression steady, filled with a sadness he knew he'd never fully understand. "I don't expect you to understand my pain, Noah. I don't expect you to completely make things right. But what I want, what I need, is something money can't buy." He nodded, feeling helpless but determined to do whatever it took. "Tell me what it is, Stella." She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "I want you to keep going, to help the people you hurt, not to impress me or ease your guilt, but because it's the right thing to do. I want to see with my own eyes that you truly care, that you've changed." Noah swallowed hard. He understood the gravity of her request, knew that this was a path with no shortcuts. And even if he never earned full forgiveness, he realized he had to do this. Not just for her, but for himself too. "I promise, Stella. I promise I won't stop. I'll keep going, no matter what it takes." She looked at him in silence, and for a brief moment, he thought he saw something shift in her gaze. Maybe a spark of acceptance, maybe a hint of relief, knowing that, even if forgiveness was unlikely, he was willing to walk this road. In the days and weeks that followed, Noah dedicated himself fully to keeping his promise. He visited towns where his company had caused harm, met with families who had lost their businesses, listened to stories of lives he had turned into tragedies. He didn't expect everyone to accept his attempts at making amends, but he was determined to keep going, to restore at least a small part of what he had taken. Stella watched his efforts from afar, observing him with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Part of her still refused to believe that Noah could truly change, that the arrogant and cold man she had once known could turn into someone selfless and genuine. But as time passed, something inside her began to soften. One day, seeing him return from one of his trips, exhausted and worn out but still resolved to continue, Stella felt a flicker of compassion. She knew he could never completely erase the past, but she couldn't ignore that he was trying. Slowly, without even realizing it, she began to open a small space in her heart, a sliver where hope and acceptance started to take root. On a quiet morning, Noah found her again in the garden. This time, he sat beside her without saying a word. They sat in silence for a few minutes, just taking in the moment. Finally, Stella broke the silence, her voice soft and thoughtful. "I've been watching what you've been doing, Noah," she said, her eyes on the horizon. "I can see you're really trying to make things right. I know the weight of guilt isn't easy to carry, but I'm starting to believe that your change is real." Noah felt a surge of relief mixed with gratitude. He knew there was still a long road ahead, but Stella's words were the confirmation that maybe he was finally on the right path. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Stella," he replied sincerely. "But every act, every attempt to make things right, brings me closer to a purpose that goes beyond anything I'd ever imagined. If I can help rebuild even a fraction of what I destroyed, even if it can't erase the past, I'll be doing what needs to be done." She nodded, a faint smile forming on her lips. For the first time, he noticed a soft glow in her eyes, a sign that the pain she carried was starting to give way to something new. "Maybe I'll never be able to forget what happened," she said thoughtfully. "But I'm learning that forgiveness isn't necessarily for the other person, but for ourselves. Holding on to bitterness, it traps us, chains us to the past. And in a way, seeing you fight for this redemption has brought me some peace." Noah remained silent, absorbing every word. He knew he couldn't turn back time, but now he understood that what truly mattered was to keep moving forward, building a legacy greater than his pride or ambition. As the days went by, the interactions between Noah and Stella began to change subtly. The cold silence and suffocating tension between them started to dissolve, giving way to lighter conversations and, occasionally, even laughter. Stella, who once seemed like an impenetrable fortress, began to open up small spaces for Noah, allowing him to get to know her beyond the pain and resentment that had separated them. Each day brought a new discovery, a new gesture that brought them closer. They shared moments in the garden, laughed about stories from the past, and sometimes Stella would tell him about her childhood and the simple things she loved. Noah listened to every word with genuine attention, captivated by her depth and resilient heart. He felt, in some way, reborn beside her, and the love he was beginning to feel was completely different from anything he had experienced before. The 3-month period was coming to an end, but Noah felt that he couldn't just let her go. He couldn't imagine his life without Stella by his side. So he decided it was time to reveal what he truly felt. That night, Noah prepared a special dinner, different from any other. It wasn't the extravagant luxury he usually used to impress, but an intimate and cozy dinner with simple dishes he knew she liked. The atmosphere was light, and under the soft candlelight, he watched Stella, taking in every detail of her, as if wanting to keep that moment forever. Stella seemed relaxed, her face softened by the candlelight. She talked about her latest visit to the flower shop, laughing as she described the antics of a clumsy customer. Noah listened with a smile, but the nervousness inside him grew. He knew he needed to tell the truth, to open his heart, even though he didn't know how she would react. After dinner, he invited her to the garden. They walked in silence, and Noah's heart raced with every step. They stopped under the starry sky, the night air wrapped in a quietness that made the moment even more intense. "Stella," he began, hesitantly, searching for the right words. "I know what we had was, at the start, just a bet. I thought I could control everything, that I could make you bend, but today I realize how wrong I was." She looked at him attentively, but her eyes revealed a kindness and patience he had never seen before. "These months by your side changed everything for me," he continued, his voice choked with emotion. "You made me see who I really was, what I had lost, and now I feel like I can't live without you by my side." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "Stella, I know it's not easy for you to believe me after everything, but I love you, and I don't want this to end. I don't want you to leave when these 3 months are over. I want you to stay. I want to try, for real this time, but without lies, without bets. Just us, building something true. Noah's voice trembled slightly, and he watched her with anticipation, anxiously waiting for a response. But Stella remained silent, her eyes fixed on his. Noah's heart pounded harder, and the silence seemed to stretch for an eternity. Finally, Stella took a deep breath and lowered her gaze before responding, her voice low and hesitant. "Noah," she began, her voice filled with emotion. I also love you." Her words fell over him like a wave of relief and happiness. Noah felt reborn, as if, in that instant, all the pains and guilts of the past had given way to a genuine, pure, and true love. They both remained silent for a moment, absorbing the intensity of the moment, but their looks and smiles said more than any words could express. They finally felt free to love each other, without the weight of resentments or past mistakes. The next morning, Noah invited Stella for a walk in the park. They walked together, talking, laughing, and observing the simplicity of life around them. Noah was surprised by how much her presence made everything lighter, more real. Being by Stella's side showed him a new meaning to love and life, something he could never have imagined. As the days passed, Noah dedicated himself to surprising her in every possible way. It was no longer with expensive gifts or luxurious dinners, but with simple and sincere gestures that showed the transformation she had inspired in him. He took an interest in her work, accompanied her to the flower shop, and sometimes they spent hours talking about community aid projects, something Stella had always valued. Each day gave Stella a new reason to be proud of the man Noah was becoming. She saw him helping people sincerely, committed not only to righting his past wrongs, but to building a legacy that would inspire others. He was now a man who no longer lived just for himself, but who was dedicated to doing good, driven by the love he felt for her. One afternoon, as they walked through the park, Noah suddenly stopped and took her hand. "Stella, I want you to know that everything I do now is with the hope of being someone you can respect, someone you can be proud of, and that's because you showed me what really matters." She smiled, her eyes shining with an emotion he had learned to recognize. "I'm already proud of you, Noah. The man you're becoming, he's so much better than the one I first met. And despite everything that's happened, I wouldn't change a thing, because, in the end, it brought us here." They continued their walk, and Noah felt more fulfilled and at peace than he ever imagined possible. The scars of the past still existed, but now they marked a journey of transformation, a journey that had brought them closer in a way he could never have foreseen. With their love growing stronger each day, Noah and Stella started planning a future together. Now their dreams and goals were shared. What once seemed impossible for Noah, letting go of his pride and old ambitions, had become his greatest strength. Stella inspired him to look beyond wealth and power, helping him appreciate small joys and moments of simplicity. One of the projects that brought Noah and Stella together the most was creating a foundation dedicated to supporting families and small businesses in need. Noah wanted to do more than just make up for the past. He wanted to change the world around him, building a legacy that truly made a difference. One sunny morning, they visited a community in one of the towns most affected by Noah's ruthless decisions in the past. The atmosphere was one of hard work and recovery, yet there was hope, with new businesses emerging and families regaining stability. Noah and Stella talked with the locals, listened to their stories of resilience, and promised support for initiatives that would help the community thrive. As they walked through the area, Noah paused to look at an old factory that had been shut down. He stood quietly for a moment, taking in the weight of the consequences of his past choices. "I never imagined how many lives I could affect," he said thoughtfully. "Back then, it was all about numbers. I didn't see people. I didn't see their stories. But you showed me that, Stella." She held his hand, offering comfort and encouragement. "And now, you're changing those stories. You're giving people the chance you didn't give them before. That's what matters, Noah. What matters is what you do moving forward." His eyes lit up with renewed determination. Stella could always see beyond his flaws, helping him believe in his potential to change. She was his anchor, the strength that motivated him to keep going. On the way home, Noah surprised her by stopping in front of a small community school that had been partially destroyed and was about to close due to lack of funds. He looked at Stella, a spark in his eyes. "What if we helped this school?" he suggested. "Invested in it, offered resources and activities for the kids? I want them to have opportunities I never provided to other families in the past." Stella smiled, touched. Seeing Noah genuinely care about each detail, each life, filled her heart with pride. "That would be amazing, Noah. You're becoming the man I always hoped to find, and I'm so happy to be by your side to see it happen." Together, they started planning the details of the project, gathering a team to renovate the school and bring in new teachers. They wanted the children to have a solid foundation, to be able to dream without limits, something Stella knew was essential to building a true future. As the months passed, Noah and Stella became an unstoppable team. He brought determination and resources, and she, the vision and care for each life touched by their projects. Gradually, Noah was no longer seen as the cold and calculating businessman, but as a man who genuinely cared about those around him. One evening, as they walked together in the garden under the starlit sky, Noah stopped and pulled her close. "Stella, everything I am today, everything we're building, I owe to you. You gave me a new purpose, a fresh start. And I just want you to know that none of this would be possible without you by my side." She smiled, moved, and gently held his face. "And you gave me the love I never thought I'd have, Noah. You proved that forgiveness and transformation are real, and I couldn't be prouder of everything we've built together." They were silent for a moment, wrapped in the love and closeness they had cultivated. There, under the stars, both knew this was just the beginning of a new journey. Noah and Stella's life became a cycle of love, work, and growth. Their actions inspired not just those around them, but also other businesses and families who saw in them an example that love and respect could overcome any barrier. A few days later, Noah and Stella organized a special event to celebrate the opening of the newly renovated and expanded school, thanks to their efforts. The school was much more than a building. It was a symbol of hope and a concrete proof of the impact kindness and humility could bring to the world. At the inauguration ceremony, Noah gave a heartfelt speech, sharing his own story and admitting his past mistakes. He talked about redemption, about how Stella's love and forgiveness had transformed him. There was a shine in his eyes, and at the end of his speech, the applause filled the air. But what mattered most to him was Stella's proud look. After the ceremony, Noah and Stella went to the school and walked through the halls, now filled with the voices and laughter of children. Noah felt a deep peace, a sense of purpose he had never imagined possible. "This is our legacy, Stella," he said, moved. "Not just for what we did together, but for what we inspired in others. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you, building a better world." She hugged him tightly, her eyes filled with tears of happiness. "Me too, Noah. And I know that together, we can face anything." That night, when they returned home, they both knew they were where they were always meant to be, side by side, as partners, friends, and above all, as souls who had found redemption in the love they shared. One morning, while Stella was having her coffee, she felt a bit nauseous, an unexpected discomfort that repeated over the following days. With a growing intuition, she decided to take a test, and when she saw the positive result, her heart raced. She was pregnant, and when she had her first medical checkup, the surprise was even greater. She was expecting twins. Let's play a game with those who only read the comments. Type hamburger in the comments. Only those who get this far will understand. Now let's continue the story. The news filled her with indescribable happiness, but also emotion as she remembered everything she had been through. Now, a new beginning emerged, a new hope for the future. That same night, after dinner, Stella decided to tell Noah. "Noah," she began, her voice slightly trembling, trying to contain her emotion. "I have a surprise for you." He looked at her with curiosity and a smile, having no idea what was coming. "A surprise?" Noah asked, his eyes shining with anticipation. "You know I'm terrible with surprises. Will you give me a hint?" Stella smiled, holding his hands. "No hints this time." She took a deep breath, looking him in the eyes. "Noah, I'm pregnant." For a moment, Noah was speechless, the shock mixing with a joy so great he couldn't contain it. His eyes widened and a huge smile spread across his face. He pulled Stella into a tight hug, laughing and crying at the same time, unable to fully express the happiness he felt. Are you serious?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "We're going to have a baby?" Stella laughed, tears rolling down her face as she caressed his cheek. "No, Noah, we're having two. I'm expecting twins." The news hit him with even greater force. He hugged her again, as if trying to absorb the reality of the moment, love and happiness overflowing in his heart. Everything they had been through, the suffering, the pains, and the internal battles, now seemed to have led to this moment of renewal and redemption. Noah, feeling the significance of the moment, took a deep breath and stepped back slightly, holding her hands tenderly. "Stella," he said, his voice full of deep and sincere emotion, "I need to tell you something. Now that we're going to have our family, I want to do this the right way. I want you to marry me, but this time, a real marriage. Not because of a bet, not because of any game or conditions. I want it to be a marriage out of love, because I love you more than anything." Stella looked at him, surprised and moved, his words touching her deeply. She smiled, with tears streaming down her face, and nodded with an emotional yes. This wasn't just the promise of a new beginning, but a future built on a love they both had fought to find. The wedding was simple, just as they wanted. No superficial glamour, no ostentation, just a few close friends and family in a charming and intimate spot in their own garden. The ceremony was outdoors, under the soft light of late afternoon, with flowers carefully chosen by Stella and Noah, reflecting the new meaning they both found in simplicity and genuine love. When Stella walked into the garden, dressed in a simple white gown, Noah felt his heart race. She was beautiful, radiant, and at that moment, he knew this was what he had been waiting for all his life. There were no more games, no more external expectations, just the two of them, united by a true love, ready to face the future together. At the altar, hand in hand, they exchanged heartfelt vows, filled with promises built on every obstacle they had overcome. Noah looked deep into Stella's eyes, his voice low but full of certainty. "Stella," he began, "you saved me. You saved my soul, my life, and showed me what true love really means. From today on, I promise to be the husband and father you and our children deserve. I promise to build a life with you filled with love, respect, and kindness, because you're everything I never knew I needed, and everything I now have the honor to love." Stella held his hands tightly, tears shimmering in her eyes as she responded. "Noah, you taught me that pain can make way for forgiveness, and that love is the most powerful force there is. I promise to be by your side, facing every joy and every challenge. Today, I marry you not just as your love, but as your life partner, and together, we'll build the family I've always dreamed of." When they exchanged rings, they both felt a sense of completion. It was the end of a painful past and the start of a future filled with hope. Their kiss was met with cheers and happy tears from friends and family, and as they embraced, Noah and Stella knew this was the beginning of a new life, now full of meaning. In the following months, the anticipation of their twins brought even more moments of closeness and joy. Noah cared for Stella with devotion, and together they prepared the baby's room, choosing each detail with love and care. The excitement grew each day, and more than ever, Noah felt whole with the woman who had transformed his life. One afternoon, as they painted the baby's room together, Noah paused for a moment to watch Stella, who was painting with dedication and joy. Moving closer, he hugged her from behind, placing his hands over her belly, now showing signs of the new life growing within. "You know, Stella, I never thought I could be this happy," he whispered, his voice low but full of gratitude. "And now, with you and our children, I feel I've found what I was always looking for." She smiled and placed her hands over his, the two united in a moment of love and tenderness. "Me too, Noah. And I know everything we went through brought us here to this moment. Now, we're a family, and I know that together, we can face anything." With the birth of the twins a few months later, Noah and Stella experienced a happiness that went beyond any material success or professional achievement. Seeing their children for the first time brought an indescribable emotion, a pure and deep love that sealed the new purpose of their lives forever. Noah held the little ones in his arms, tears streaming down his face as he looked at Stella. now the mother of his children and his partner for life. They had found redemption and a new beginning, and the pain and scars of the past were now only distant memories, overshadowed by the light of a love that grew stronger every day. And so, with their babies in their arms, Noah and Stella knew they had found a home built not just of bricks and concrete, but of love, resilience, and hope. Do you think Stella made the right choice in forgiving and marrying Noah? Leave your opinion in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10, what score would you give it? Subscribe to the channel to follow all our stories, and click here on the end screen to watch more stories.